Tyler? Is that a black man eating lunch?
Officer Bradley Wilson said it loud.
Ain't he a nigger?
Packed Virginia diner, lunch hour. 12 customers froze, forks in the air. Wilson walked up behind him.
You hear me, boy? When a white man talks, you stop chewing.
The man swallowed, set his fork down.
Then talk, officer. I'm listening.
Your kind eats on the floor. Get down there.
Wilson flipped the plate. Meatloaf splattered the linoleum.
Lick it up, boy. Every bite.
He never noticed the napkin beside the coffee cup, something rectangular underneath. In 90 seconds, Wilson would wish he'd never put on that uniform, never opened his mouth to that black man.
Rewind 90 seconds.
To understand what was under that napkin, you have to know who Marshall Langston was, and why a 54-year-old black man was sitting alone in a small Virginia diner on a Tuesday afternoon, wearing a pressed navy blazer, carrying a leather briefcase worth more than most of the trucks in the parking lot. Greenfield, Virginia, population around 12,400. A bedroom town tucked between horse farms and old tobacco land, 90 minutes south of Washington, D.C., the kind of place where tourists call it charming, and the locals call it ours. 12:38 in the afternoon. Late September, but the heat hadn't quit. Humid enough that the diner windows sweated on the outside. Country radio drifted out of a speaker above the register, low and twangy. Sweet tea condensation pooled on chrome napkin holders. The lunch rush was thinning. 3 tables, a couple booths, and the long stainless steel counter that had been there since 1958. A silver Lexus rolled into the gravel lot, pulled in slow, parked clean between the lines. The man who stepped out was tall, mid-50s, salt at the temples, clean-shaven, pressed khakis, navy blazer over a white button-down, no tie. Worn leather briefcase in his right hand, the kind that's been carried through 20 courtrooms and refuses to die. He didn't rush. He paused at the diner door to hold it open for an elderly white woman walking out with her grandson. She thanked him. He nodded, soft, quiet, and let her go first. Then he stepped inside. The bell over the door chimed twice. May Sullivan looked up from the register. 60-something, hair pinned back, been waiting tables here since Nixon was president. She gave him the same look she gave everyone. Friendly, professional, no fuss. Coffee, hun? Please. And whatever the special is, she poured before he sat. He took the last stool at the counter, the one closest to the window. Slid the briefcase between his ankles, removed the blazer slow, folded it once, neat as a hospital corner, and laid it across his lap. He didn't open the newspaper right away. He just rested his hand on it, like it meant something. If you looked close, you'd notice things. On his shirt cuff, a small black cufflink with an embossed gold seal, too small to read from across the room. A leather card holder set on the counter beside his coffee. He covered it with a linen napkin without even thinking. Pure muscle memory. The newspaper was a Washington Post, folded careful at the front page. Only one word peeked above the fold. Confirmed. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. He pulled it out. Caller ID, Judge Whitmore. He silenced it, slipped it back. Everything all right, hun? May asked. First day jitters can wait. I'll call her back after lunch. May smiled, not really understanding. She turned to ring up another table. At a booth across the room, 2 old-timers glanced up over their coffee. One muttered something to the other looked away. Not hostile, just noticing. The kind of noticing a black man gets used to, especially in a town where black faces don't sit at the counter very often. A teenage busboy hauling a tray of dirty dishes wouldn't make eye contact at all. Marshall didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't even seem to register it, because Marshall Langston had been in rooms 1,000 times harder than this one. He was here for one reason. His grandfather was born 10 miles down this same road, a black sharecropper's son who fought in the Pacific in World War II. He used to sit on a porch in Roxbury, Massachusetts, and tell 6-year-old Marshall about the day in 1962, the day he walked into this exact diner, sat at this exact counter and got told to eat out back with the dogs. His grandfather died in 1998. Before he passed, he made his grandson promise one thing. Baby, when you get to be somebody, and you will, you go back. You sit where they wouldn't let me sit, and you order the meatloaf. That was the promise. Today was the day Marshall was finally allowed to keep it. He had 30 minutes before he needed to be back on the road. 28 of those minutes were not going to go the way he planned. The bell over the door chimed too loud. 2 cops walked in, hats on, sunglasses still down. The kind of entrance that says we own this room and everybody in it. Officer Bradley Wilson came first. Early 40s, thick neck, badge worn just a little too high on his chest. 8 years on the Greenfield force, 14 citizen complaints in his file, all of them quietly closed. His partner, Officer Tyler Anderson, 24 years old, peach fuzz mustache, walked 2 steps behind him like a duckling chasing its mother. A patrol cruiser sat outside, parked diagonal across 2 spaces, half blocking the front door. Engine still running, radio crackling. Wilson stopped in the middle of the diner and pulled his sunglasses down slow. He scanned the room the way a wolf scans a meadow. Tables, booths, counter. His gaze landed on the only black man in the building, and stayed. Anderson followed Wilson's eyes. Anderson's hand drifted to his belt. They walked over. May behind the counter felt it before it started. Her hand froze mid-pour. Coffee dripped from the pot onto the saucer. Wilson stopped beside Marshall's stool, planted both palms flat on the laminate, leaned in. "Afternoon, sir. We got a call. Suspicious individual in the area. Description matches you. Mind telling us what you're doing here?" Marshall didn't look up from his plate. "Having lunch, officer." "Yeah, I can see that. You got some ID? May I ask the nature of the investigation first?" Wilson's jaw tightened. He shot a sideways grin at Anderson. "Hear that? Lawyer talk. You a lawyer, boy?" The word boy landed in the diner like a dropped glass. May's hand twitched. The old-timers at the booth stopped chewing. The busboy stopped wiping the same spot on the same table. Marshall finally lifted his eyes. Calm, steady. The kind of calm that comes from a man who's been in this exact moment dozens of times in his life and has never, ever lost his composure. "I'd prefer, sir, Officer Wilson." The way he said it, soft, almost gentle, made Wilson straighten up. Anderson took half a step back. Neither of them had ever been spoken to like that by a black civilian, not with that much quiet authority. Wilson didn't like it, so Wilson doubled down. "You don't get to tell me what to prefer. Stand up, hands where I can see them." Marshall set down his coffee, wiped his mouth slow with a paper napkin, folded the napkin once, placed it next to his plate. Then he stood, palms open at chest height, fingers spread, the way a man stands when he's been trained for this exact scenario his entire adult life. Because he had. 26 years in the Army JAG Corps will teach you how to stand. 8 years as a federal prosecutor will teach you how to keep your voice steady. And 2 weeks ago, the United States Senate had taught him something else entirely. But Wilson didn't know any of that yet. Anderson stepped in close. "Spread 'em. Feet shoulder width. I'm gonna pat you down." Marshall didn't argue. He spread his feet, lifted his arms. Anderson ran his hands across the navy blazer. Rough, fast, sloppy. Down the slacks, around the ankles. He found the leather card holder on the counter, but it had slipped half under the linen napkin during the pat-down. Anderson's eyes passed right over it. "He's clean, Brad." Wilson grunted. "Yeah? Then why don't you sit your clean ass back down while we run your plate? Don't move." Marshall sat. Anderson stayed close, hand resting on his sidearm. Not gripping it, but close enough to send the message. Wilson stepped outside to the cruiser. The diner held its breath. May found her voice first. "Officer, this gentleman hasn't done anything. He's just having luck." "Ma'am," Anderson cut in, "this is a police matter. Keep pouring coffee." May's mouth shut. Her eyes filled. She turned away. The man in the Greenfield football booster's cap, 2 stools down, quietly slid his cell phone out of his pocket, held it below the counter, hit record. Anderson noticed the movement and shot him a look hot enough to melt steel. The phone went back in the pocket, but not all the way off. Anderson turned his attention to Marshall, decided to fill the silence. So what brings a guy like you to a place like this anyway? Lunch. Lunch, right. In a $1,000 suit, driving a Lexus, carrying a briefcase. Let me guess, you sell something? Something we should know about? I'm a public servant, officer. Anderson laughed. A what? You mean like a janitor? Something like that. Marshall didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't take the bait. May, hands shaking, set down the plate. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, a square of cornbread on the side. On the house, hun. I'll pay full price, ma'am, plus a generous tip. Please ring it up. She nodded, couldn't speak. Marshall picked up his fork. The bell chimed again. Wilson came back in. He was walking different now, slower, meaner. The kind of slow that comes when a cop has run a plate and gotten back exactly nothing. No warrants, no record, no excuse. Which, for a man like Wilson, was the worst possible outcome. Because now he had to either let this black man eat his lunch in peace or escalate. He chose to escalate. Plate's not coming back stolen, Wilson announced, loud enough for the whole diner. Doesn't mean you didn't borrow that fancy car from somebody or steal it. We've had a string of car thefts in this county, real bad ones. Marshall set the fork down, looked at him direct. Officer Wilson, am I being detained? You being smart with me? I'm asking a legal question. Am I being detained or am I free to leave? Wilson hated that question. Every cop with something to hide hates that question. You being free to leave is up to me. And right now you're being a real pain in my ass, son. So here's what's gonna happen. He leaned close enough that Marshall could smell the chewing tobacco wedged behind his lip. You're gonna finish your little lunch, real quick. And then you and that fancy briefcase are taking a ride with us down to the station so we can have a real conversation. Sound good, sir? He spat the word sir like it tasted bad. Marshall didn't flinch. I'd prefer to finish my meal in peace, officer, and I'd prefer to do it without further harassment. Harassment? Wilson grinned at Anderson. You hear that, Tyler? Now we're harassing him. That's gonna play real cute when I write up the report. He looked down at Marshall's plate, looked at the meatloaf, the mashed potatoes, the cornbread, looked at Marshall. A slow smile spread across Wilson's face, the kind of smile that said, I just thought of something fun. Tyler, is that a black man eating lunch or a monkey who learned to hold a fork? Anderson laughed. Wilson stepped behind Marshall, tobacco breath on his neck. You hear me, boy? When a white man talks, you stop chewing. Marshall swallowed, set his fork down. Then talk, officer, I'm listening. Oh, the monkey learned English. What do you want, officer? Your black ass off my counter. Your kind eats on the floor. Get down there. Marshall didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at the plate. And in that 1 second of silence, that 1 second before Wilson's finger hooked under the rim, Marshall Langston made a decision. He could end this right now. One word. One flip of the napkin. 2 cops on the ground in handcuffs by 1 p.m. Easy. Or he could let them keep going. Let them say every word they were about to say. Let them do every ugly thing they were about to do. In front of 12 witnesses. In front of 2 phones already recording from under tables. In front of May, who was about to become the most important witness in the most important civil rights case Greenfield, Virginia had seen in 40 years. He could let them dig their own grave, and then bury them in it. He chose to let them dig. Wilson hooked the plate. Lick it up, boy. Every bite. The meatloaf hit the linoleum with a wet, ugly crack. Gravy splattered both his boots. The cornbread bounced twice and rolled under the next stool. And somewhere in the back, the man in the booster's cap quietly hit record again. This time he didn't put the phone away. The plate hit the floor and the diner went so quiet you could hear the radio still playing a sad country song nobody was listening to. Gravy crawled across the linoleum in slow brown streaks. The meatloaf sat at Marshall's feet in 3 broken chunks. A green bean stuck to the toe of Wilson's boot. Wilson didn't notice. He was too busy enjoying himself. "Oops! Clumsy me!" he laughed. Anderson laughed with him. "Well, you wanted to eat in peace. Eat in peace. Off the floor. Lick it up, boy, every bite. We'll watch." A small child in a booth by the window started crying. The mother yanked the kid into her lap and pulled a menu up to block the view. 2 old-timers stared into their coffee like the cups had answers. The teenage busboy was frozen mid-step with a tray of dirty dishes balanced against his hip. Marshall didn't look at the floor. He didn't look at the meatloaf. He looked at Wilson, then at Anderson. Then, slow, deliberate, almost gentle, he turned his head and looked at the napkin on the counter beside his coffee cup. The leather card holder was still tucked underneath, slightly raised, waiting. He looked back at Wilson. "I'm not getting on the floor, officer." Wilson's smirk dropped a notch. "What did you just say to me?" "I said I'm not getting on the floor. I'm a grown man. You're going to have to come up with a different idea." Anderson stepped in fast, grabbed Marshall's upper arm, hard, the kind of grip that leaves a thumbprint bruised the next morning. "Get up, we're going outside." Marshall didn't resist, didn't pull away, but he didn't move either. "On what charge, Officer Anderson?" "On the charge of me saying so. Move." That's when Wilson decided to do something he had absolutely no legal right to do. He grabbed the briefcase between Marshall's ankles. "Hey, hands off the briefcase!"
Or what, boy? You gonna call your lawyer?
Wilson popped both latches before Marshall could say another word. The briefcase clicked open. Wilson started rifling through it like a customs agent looking for drugs. What he pulled out instead made him pause. A black judicial robe, folded neat as a flag. The fabric so pressed it still held the crease lines from the dry cleaner. Wilson held it up. "What the hell is this, Halloween?" Anderson cracked up. "He a preacher, Brad?"
Nah, look at this.
Robe's got a fancy little patch on the sleeve. What are you, some kind of choir boy? Marshall's jaw moved, just once, just barely. A muscle flexing under skin. He said nothing. Wilson tossed the robe back into the briefcase like a wet towel, reached deeper, pulled out a leather-bound book. He flipped it open. "The Constitution of the United States. Cute. You memorize this for fun, boy?" "That book belongs to me. Please put it back." "Or what? You gonna sue me? With what? Welfare money?" He flipped through it, rough, pages folded. One ripped a little at the corner. "Officer Wilson, that book was given to me by my grandfather in 1987. Put it back." Wilson froze for a half-second, looked at Marshall, looked at the book, and then, out of pure spite, he tossed the Constitution onto the gravy-soaked linoleum next to the meatloaf. The book landed with a soft thump. A page tore. May let out a sound that wasn't quite a word. Marshall's eyes closed for one long second. When they opened, something had shifted in them. The calm was still there, but underneath it, something else had started to wake up. "Officer Wilson, I'm going to ask you one more time. Step back." "Or what?" The radio on Wilson's shoulder crackled. "Wilson, you got Hawthorne en route. 2 minutes out." "Copy." Wilson turned back to Marshall. "Hear that? Sergeant's on his way. So you can keep playing tough guy, or you can save us all some time and get on the floor like I told you." Marshall didn't answer. He looked at the Constitution lying in the gravy. He looked at the briefcase, open and ransacked. He looked at the photograph that had fallen out, a small framed black and white of an elderly black man in a World War II uniform. His grandfather. The picture lay face down on the floor, the glass cracked across the middle. That was the moment Marshall stopped looking like a customer. He started looking like a judge. 2 minutes later, the bell chimed again. Sergeant Gregory Hawthorne walked in, mid-50s, buzz cut. 26 years on the Greenfield Force. 20 of those years quietly burying complaints filed against Bradley Wilson, a man who had built a career out of looking the other way. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't have to. He took one look at the black man at the counter and one look at his officer standing over a destroyed plate of food, and his entire body relaxed. "What have we got here, Brad?" Uncooperative subject. Refused to comply with lawful orders. Resisted a pat-down. Mouthing off. "That's so." Hawthorne walked over, stood directly in front of Marshall, crossed his arms. "Sir, you're going to come with us down to the station. Now. Resist, and we add charges. Understand?" "Sergeant Hawthorne, I haven't been told what I'm being arrested for." "That's because you're not under arrest yet. You're being detained. Big difference." "On what reasonable suspicion?" "On the reasonable suspicion that I'm telling you to come with me." Hawthorne smiled. "That's how it works here, son." Anderson tightened his grip on Marshall's arm, started to pull. "Up, let's go." And right then, Marshall did something none of them expected. He sat back down. Just sat. Like he was settling back into his stool to finish a coffee. He even reached out, picked up his mug, and took a slow sip. Anderson nearly fell off balance from the sudden lack of resistance. "Sergeant Hawthorne!" Marshall's voice was steady, quieter than before, the voice of a man who's about to read a verdict. "Before this goes any further, I'd like you to do 3 things. Listen carefully." "Excuse me?" "Number 1, I want you to instruct Officer Anderson to remove his hand from my arm. Number 2, I want all 3 of your body-worn cameras turned on, if they aren't already, and I want you to confirm out loud that they're on. Number 3, I'm going to slowly, using only my left hand, lift the napkin on this counter and show you something. I want each of you to remember exactly what you've said and done in the last 6 minutes, because every word and every action is going to be on the record very, very soon." Hawthorne snorted. "Sir, you don't give the orders here, I do." Marshall set down the coffee. "Sergeant, I am giving you one chance to handle this professionally. I strongly suggest you take it." Wilson laughed. "Or what, boy?" Marshall didn't answer Wilson. He looked at Hawthorne, eye to eye, man to man. "Lift the napkin yourself, Sergeant, if you'd rather. I'm not going to touch it. I want you to be the one to lift it. And then you decide how the next 10 minutes of your career go." Something in his voice did it. The certainty, the gravity. Hawthorne paused, just 1 second too long. Anderson's grip on Marshall's arm went slack. Even Wilson's smirk wavered. Hawthorne walked the 3 steps to the counter. He stared at the napkin. White linen, folded neat, slightly raised at one corner, something rectangular underneath. The cufflink on Marshall's shirt caught a sliver of light from the window, and for the first time, the embossed gold seal on it was clear enough for Hawthorne to almost read. His hand hovered. Outside, the cruiser radio crackled with a routine dispatch call. Inside, the country song on the radio ended. Started another one, even sadder than the last. A truck rumbled past on the road outside, vibrating the window pane. In the booth, the man in the Greenfield football booster's cap had stopped trying to hide his phone. He was holding it up, filming openly. 2 other patrons had done the same. May had both hands pressed flat against her mouth. The cornbread under the next stool had finally stopped rolling. Hawthorne's fingers touched the corner of the napkin. He lifted it. Hawthorne lifted the napkin. For 1 long second, the diner went absolutely silent. Even the country song on the radio seemed to stop mid-chord. The hum of the refrigerator behind the counter, the drip of the coffee pot, the fan spinning lazy above the cash register. All of it. Gone. Just 26 people holding the same breath. Underneath the linen sat a small leather card holder. Black, tooled gold trim, already flipped open, and inside it, gleaming under the cheap fluorescent light of a small-town Virginia diner, was something Sergeant Gregory Hawthorne had only ever seen on television. A federal pocket commission. The seal of the United States of America embossed in gold leaf. An eagle, talons spread, an olive branch in one claw and arrows in the other. Beneath it, in clean, engraved capital letters, "The Honorable Marshall Langston, United States District Judge, Eastern District of Virginia." Next to the commission, in its own velvet-lined slot, sat a small silver and blue lapel pin, the official seal of the federal judiciary, issued to exactly one person per appointment in the entire country, worn on the lapel of a federal judge anywhere, anytime, as proof of who they are. Hawthorne read it once, read it again, then read it a third time, because his brain genuinely refused to process it the first 2 times. His mouth opened. No sound came out. His tongue actually moved, trying to form the word judge, but the air wouldn't follow it. Anderson saw it next. He was standing closest. His grip on Marshall's arm went so slack that his hand just slid off entirely and hung at his side, useless, like the muscles had been cut. His face went the color of old paper. He took 1 step back, then another, then bumped into a stool and just stood there, staring at the badge like it was a snake about to strike. Wilson saw it last. Wilson, who'd called Marshall a monkey. Wilson, who'd tipped the meatloaf onto the linoleum. Wilson, who'd thrown a man's grandfather's constitution into a puddle of gravy not 3 minutes earlier. Wilson's smirk didn't fall. It evaporated. The color drained out of his face so fast you could see the blood retreat from his forehead, down his cheeks, into his neck. His knees actually buckled. He had to grab the counter to stay standing. He whispered something nobody could hear, probably his own name, the way a man whispers it when he realizes his life has just split in 2. Marshall reached out slow, picked up the card holder from the counter, closed it gently, slid it into the inside pocket of his blazer where it had always belonged. Then he stood up, 6 feet 2 inches, straight back, the kind of posture 26 years in the United States Army Judge Advocate General's Corps gives a man. The kind of posture no amount of Wilson trying to look tough was ever going to compete with. He buttoned the middle button of his navy blazer with 1 hand, tugged the sleeve straight, adjusted the cufflink with the small, embossed federal seal that none of them had ever been able to read from across the room. When he spoke, his voice was steady. Not loud, not angry, just steady, the way a federal judge's voice is supposed to be steady from the bench, even when the world is on fire. Gentlemen, my name is Marshall Langston. I was confirmed by the United States Senate exactly 2 weeks ago by a vote of 88 to 10. I am being ceremonially robed at the federal courthouse in Richmond at 3 o'clock this afternoon, 58 minutes from right now. The robe Officer Wilson held up and called a Halloween costume is the robe I will be wearing when I take that bench. The Constitution Officer Wilson threw onto this floor is the document I have sworn an oath, twice in my life, to support and defend, against all enemies, foreign and domestic. He paused, let it land. Nobody moved. The photograph Officer Wilson cracked the glass on belongs to my grandfather, Master Sergeant Elijah Langston, United States Army, Second World War, Pacific Theater. 2 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart. He was born 10 miles down this road. He was refused service at this exact counter in 1962. He came home from fighting fascism on islands most of you have never heard of, and he was told to walk around the back of this diner and eat with the dogs. He looked at each officer, 1 by 1. Today was the day I came back to keep a promise I made to that man before he died in 1998. To sit at this counter, to order the meatloaf, to finish what he was never allowed to start. Instead, 3 sworn officers of the law made a very different kind of history today. And gentlemen, every single second of it has been recorded on at least 4 cell phones in this room, probably more. He nodded across the diner. The man in the Greenfield football boosters cap lifted his phone proudly above his head. Yes, Your Honor, full HD, from the second they walked in. 2 booths over, a middle-aged woman raised hers. Same here, sir, with audio. A trucker at the end of the counter held up a third. Got every word, Judge, every single word. And from a corner none of the officers had even noticed. Wedged between the kitchen swing door and the soda fountain, the teenage busboy quietly raised a 4th. His hands were trembling, but the phone was steady. I've been recording the whole time, Your Honor. From back here, they didn't see me. 4 phones, 4 angles, Every slur, every shove, every laugh, every word. Wilson made a small, strangled sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "Sir, Your Honor, there was a call."
There was no call, Officer Wilson.
"We both know that. There has never been a call. I will be seeing the dispatch log within the hour. So will the FBI. Save your story for the federal grand jury." Anderson started shaking, visibly. The kind of shake that starts in the hands and moves up the arms into the shoulders. His radio crackled with a routine dispatch call. He flinched like it had bitten him through the uniform. Marshall turned to Hawthorne.
Sergeant.
"You are the senior officer on scene, so I am giving you, and only you, an opportunity. You're going to step outside. Call Chief Brooks on his personal line. Report exactly what occurred in this diner over the last 23 minutes. You will not edit. You will not minimize. You will not coach these officers. You will preserve all body-worn camera footage, all dashboard footage from the cruiser, and all radio traffic from the last hour. You will instruct your dispatcher to flag every transmission for federal subpoena. Do you understand me, Sergeant?" Hawthorne's voice came out cracked. "Yes, Your Honor, Yes, Your Honor." Wilson heard the two syllables again. The two syllables that meant federal court. That meant federal sentencing guidelines. That meant the United States Department of Justice and the Civil Rights Division, and an investigation that was going to end every career standing in this room. He stumbled backward another step, caught himself on the same stool he'd grabbed before. May found her voice, small, trembling, but clear.
Your Honor.
"I saw it all. From the first second they walked in, I'll testify. I swear to God I will testify. I should have said something the moment that man called you boy. I'm sorry I didn't. But I will say it now. In any courtroom in this country, I will say every word of it." The trucker stood up too. 60-something, Vietnam-era Marine by his bearing. "Add my name to that list, Your Honor. I'm with her." "Same here," the booster's cap said. "Me too, sir," the busboy said.
Marshall looked at each one of them.
Slow, eye to eye. Took the time to acknowledge each one with a small, deliberate nod. Then he turned back to Wilson. He stepped close. Closer than Wilson had stood to him 60 seconds earlier. Close enough that Wilson could smell Marshall's aftershave instead of the other way around. He spoke quiet enough that only Wilson could hear it. "You told me to lick it up, officer. You told me to eat off the floor like a dog. I want you to remember saying those words, because in about 90 days, you're going to be standing in front of a federal judge. And I want you to remember, out loud, on the record, under oath, that you said it. To me, today, at this counter, on the same floor my grandfather was told to eat from 63 years ago." He stepped back, picked up his briefcase, closed it neatly, looked at Hawthorne.
"Make the call, Sergeant."
"Now." Hawthorne walked outside on legs that didn't feel like his own. The gravel crunched under his boots the same way it always did. The September sun hit him the same way it always did. But nothing was the same. He stopped beside the cruiser, gripped the door handle hard enough to turn his knuckles white, and pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, this is Hawthorne. Patch me through to Chief Brooks. Personal line, code 3. Sergeant, Chief is in a budget meeting.
Patch me through to Chief Brooks.
Now." Inside the diner, nobody moved. Wilson stood frozen by the counter, both hands at his sides like a kid called to the principal's office. Anderson had backed up against the wall and was staring at the floor. Marshall sat back down on his stool, calm as he'd been an hour earlier, and quietly asked May for a fresh cup of coffee. She poured one with trembling hands and forgot to charge him for it. 22 minutes later, a black, unmarked SUV came tearing into the gravel lot. Chief Nathaniel Brooks, mid-60s, 28 years on the force, career man, lifelong Republican, never had a federal civil rights case land in his lap in his entire tenure. He was about to. He walked into the diner without his hat. He never walked into anything without his hat. That alone told everyone in the room how scared he was. He saw Marshall first. He crossed the room, stopped at the counter, did not extend a hand because he knew better than to offer one. "Your Honor, Chief Nathaniel Brooks, I just received the call. I want you to know that the conduct of my officers today does not reflect this department. I am profoundly sorry. Marshall regarded him quietly. Chief Brooks, we'll have a longer conversation later this week. For now, I need 3 things from you, right now, in this room, in front of these witnesses. Yes, Your Honor. Officer Wilson, Officer Anderson, Sergeant Hawthorne, all 3 are to be relieved of duty immediately. Sidearms, badges, radios surrendered on this counter. No phone calls, no coordination. No going back to the station to collect personal items. Internal Affairs will retrieve everything later. Brooks turned to his officers. Wilson, Anderson, Hawthorne, you heard the judge. Weapons, badges, radios, on the counter, now. Wilson's hand shook so badly he couldn't unclip his holster. Anderson got his off first and laid it down soft, like the gun might explode. Hawthorne moved last, slow, the way a man moves at his own funeral. 3 sidearms, 3 badges, 3 radios, lined up on the counter Marshall had been told to eat off the floor of. Wilson started to speak. Chief, you don't understand. I didn't know who he was, I swear to God. Brooks turned on him sharp. That's the entire problem, Bradley. You didn't know who he was, so you thought you could treat him like he was nobody. You'd have done the exact same thing to any black man who walked through that door. That is what you're being suspended for. Wilson had nothing. His mouth opened, closed. Tears started leaking down his face. Not the tears of a man sorry for what he did, the tears of a man sorry he got caught. There is a difference. Everyone in the room saw it. The FBI arrived next. Special Agent Daniel Brown of the Civil Rights Division, an old friend of Marshall's from his prosecutor days, walked in 20 minutes after Brooks. Brown looked at the suspended officers, looked at the broken plate, looked at the cracked photograph on the floor, then looked at Marshall. Federal investigation opens today, Marshall. You give your statement when you're ready. After my robing, Daniel, I have a promise to keep first. By the time Marshall walked out the diner door, 3 news vans were pulling into the parking lot. Tipped off by who, no one would ever quite figure out. Cameras swung up, mics extended. Marshall paused on the gravel, briefcase in hand. He gave them one sentence, one single sentence, looking directly into the lens. What happened to me in that diner happens every day in this country, to people who don't carry a federal commission in their pocket. Today the cameras came because of who I am. Tomorrow, I want them to come because of who they are. He got in the silver Lexus. He drove north toward Richmond, toward a robing ceremony 3 hours late, toward a courtroom his grandfather never lived to see, toward a bench he had earned twice over. Behind him, the diner closed early. May sat alone in the corner booth and quietly began to cry. The first cell phone video hit social media at 2:48 p.m. that same afternoon. By midnight, it had 4 million views. By the next morning, it had crossed 26 million. By the end of the week, the combined footage, Booster's cap, trucker, busboy, the woman in the booth, plus the body cams Marshall had ordered preserved, had been watched a total of 80 million times across every major platform on Earth. The thumbnail everyone clicked on was the same single frozen image. A black man in a navy blazer sitting calm at a diner counter. A white officer standing over him with a plate tipped sideways in one hand. Gravy mid-fall. Caption underneath in white block letters, "Lick it up, boy." The country saw it. The country did not look away. CNN ran the story on a 6-hour loop. Local Virginia stations sent every reporter they had to Greenfield. A photograph circulated within 48 hours that would later win a Pulitzer. Marshall Langston, in his judicial robes for the first time, standing in his new chambers in Richmond, holding the cracked photo of his grandfather in World War II uniform. The headline ran in newspapers across 38 countries. 3 generations, 1 counter. The Department of Justice opened a formal Civil Rights Division investigation within 48 hours. Special Agent Daniel Brown took lead. A federal grand jury was convened by U.S. Attorney Catherine Davis. Marshall, as the victim, formally recused himself from any judicial involvement in his own case. He retained civil rights attorney Harold Moore, a man who had spent 30 years suing police departments and almost never lost. The investigation tore Greenfield PD wide open. Wilson's personnel file was unsealed. 14 prior complaints, every one of them filed by a black or Latino motorist. Every single one quietly dismissed by Sergeant Hawthorne. Internal text messages from a private group chat titled "The Cleanup Crew" were recovered from Wilson's personal phone. 4 officers in the chat, hundreds of messages, slurs, photos, jokes about beatings, jokes about broken taillight stops that conveniently always seem to happen on the black side of town. The screenshots, when they leaked to the press, were so vile that 2 members of the Greenfield City Council resigned before the week was out, including the mayor's own brother, who turned out to have been forwarded the messages and laughed at them. Chief Brooks resigned 10 days after the diner incident. He was not charged with a crime, but his career was over, and he knew it. In his resignation letter, he wrote a single sentence that local papers reprinted in full. "I spent 28 years not asking the right questions, and one afternoon learning what those questions were. I'm sorry." The federal indictments came down 93 days after that meatloaf hit the floor. Officer Bradley Wilson, deprivation of rights under color of law, conspiracy against rights, falsification of police records, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. Officer Tyler Anderson, deprivation of rights under color of law and false police reports. Sergeant Gregory Hawthorne, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and falsification of internal affairs records spanning an 8-year pattern. The trial was moved to a neighboring federal district to avoid any appearance of conflict. Marshall did not attend in person. He read the transcripts every night. May Sullivan testified for 3 hours. Steady, quiet. 41 years of waiting tables had given her the kind of memory that prosecutors dream about. She quoted Wilson word for word. She quoted Anderson word for word. She quoted herself, and what she didn't say when she should have. "I should have said something the first time I saw one of them do that. To anybody. I'm here to make up for the years I didn't." The trucker testified next. 66 years old. A Vietnam-era Marine named Calvin Brooks, no relation to the chief. He looked the jury in the eye and said, "That whole diner watched what happened for 19 full minutes. And we did nothing for 19 full minutes. That's on us, too. I'll carry that." The teenage busboy testified. He cried on the stand. Said he kept the footage because his grandmother had told him, "If you see something ugly, you make sure somebody else gets to see it, too." The body cam footage played in open court. 12 jurors watched the plate hit the floor. They heard the word boy. They heard lick it up. They heard your kind eats on the floor. They heard every word in HD audio in a federal courtroom. Wilson took the stand against his own lawyer's advice. He tried to claim he didn't see race. The prosecution played the cleanup crew screenshots. He could not speak for 90 seconds. The verdicts came in on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 1 year and 1 day after the diner. Bradley Wilson, guilty on all counts, sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, permanently barred from law enforcement, stripped of pension, stripped of veterans' preference, stripped of the right to ever carry a firearm again. Tyler Anderson, guilty on reduced counts after cooperating late, 38 months in federal prison, permanently barred from law enforcement. Sergeant Gregory Hawthorne, guilty of conspiracy and obstruction, 6 years in federal prison, pension revoked. Faced 11 additional civil suits from previous black and Latino complainants whose cases he had buried. The Greenfield Police Department was placed under federal consent decree. Mandatory bias training. Mandatory body cameras worn at all times. An independent civilian oversight board was established by court order. May Sullivan was appointed to it. So was Calvin Brooks. So were 3 black community leaders who had been ignored for decades. The Virginia state legislature passed a bipartisan bill 9 months later. They called it the Langston Act. It required all dashboard and body cam footage from any traffic stop involving accusations of racial bias to be preserved for 10 years and made publicly accessible upon request. The bill passed the Virginia Senate 32-8. Marshall did not give a victory speech. He did not give an interview. He did not even attend the bill signing. On the morning the Langston Act was signed into law, he was already in his chambers at 6 a.m., reading the next case file on his desk. The work went on. Justice, as his grandfather used to say, doesn't take days off, so neither did he. 1 year later, a silver Lexus rolled into a gravel lot in Greenfield, Virginia, parked clean between the lines. A tall black man in a navy blazer stepped out. He paused at the diner door to hold it open for an elderly woman walking out with her grandson. The bell over the door chimed twice. The diner was different now, brighter, busier. A mix of faces at the booths that hadn't been there a year ago. Black families, Latino families, white families, all eating at the same counter. A small framed photograph hung above the register. An elderly black man in a World War II uniform. Master Sergeant Elijah Langston. May had put it there herself 6 months back and never taken it down. She was sitting in a corner booth now, retired, 63 years old and finally allowed to be a customer in the diner she'd worked since she was a teenager. She looked up when Marshall walked in. She didn't stand. He didn't expect her to. He slid into the booth across from her. May. Your Honor. Marshall, please. She laughed, a soft, tired, beautiful laugh, and reached across the table to squeeze his hand. He squeezed back. A new waitress, 20-something, came over with a coffee pot. What can I get you, sir? Coffee. And the meatloaf special, please. On the house, Your Honor. Full price, plus a generous tip. I owe this place a meal I never got to finish. She nodded, smiled, went to put in the order. Marshall looked at May across the table. May looked at Marshall. Neither of them said anything for a long minute. They didn't have to. The grandfather on the wall above the register was watching. He had finally been served. Wilson was in year 1 of 11 at a federal prison outside Lewisburg. Anderson was 18 months in, cooperating with researchers studying officer radicalization. Hawthorne would not speak publicly again. Chief Brooks had moved out of state and lived quietly. Calvin Brooks, the trucker, was on the Civilian Oversight Board going on 3 years and had personally reviewed 84 use-of-force complaints and recommended reforms on 22 of them. The Langston Act was law in Virginia. 3 neighboring states had passed similar legislation modeled on it. A bill at the federal level, sponsored by senators from both parties, was sitting in committee. It would not pass quickly, but it would not die either. The meatloaf came out steaming, mashed potatoes, green beans, a square of cornbread on the side. Marshall picked up his fork. He took the first bite. He chewed slow, swallowed, closed his eyes for a second. Somewhere out on a porch in Roxbury in 1962, a young black soldier home from the Pacific was finally allowed to taste it. The lesson of Marshall Langston's story isn't that justice eventually comes. It's that justice only comes when ordinary people decide to stop being ordinary witnesses. The trucker hit record. May told the truth on the stand. Calvin Brooks said, "We did nothing for 19 minutes, and that's on us too." A teenage busboy nobody noticed kept his phone rolling because his grandmother told him to. That is what changed an entire police department. That is what put a man's name on a state law. The badge under the napkin was never the real reveal. The real reveal was who in that room finally chose to act. So here's what I want to know. And I really want you to answer this in the comments because I read every single one. If you'd been sitting at that counter that afternoon, would you have hit record? Would you have spoken up the way May finally did? Would you have stood up the way Calvin did? Or would you have stayed silent until it felt safe? There is no wrong answer. There's just your answer. Tell me below. And if you've ever been the one person in a room who finally said something, hit that like button. If you know somebody who needs to hear that calm is a superpower, share this with them. Subscribe for more stories where the quiet ones in the room turn out to be the loudest in the end. Don't wait for somebody to lift the napkin. Be the person who acts before they do.
And you thought the badge under that napkin was a twist. It wasn't. The real twist is something most people in that dinner walked right past. Marshall Langston could have ended it in 5 seconds. One word, one flash of his federal commission. He chose to wait. Why? Because he understood something we forget. Justice isn't delivered by the powerful, it's delivered by the witnesses. A trucker, a waitress who stayed silent for 41 years, a teenage busboy whose grandmother once told him, "If you see something ugly, make sure somebody else sees it too." 63 years earlier, Marshall's grandfather was told to eat behind the same dinner with the dogs. 63 years of silence, broken by 4 self-falls. So sit with this for a moment. How long does silence have to last before it becomes complicity? And what does it cost more, the person who finally speaks or the person who never does? They carried that weight for 41 years. A trucker carried it for 19 minutes. Which one would you have been? Drop your honest answer in the comments. I read everyone. Subscribe for more stories where the quietest person in the room turns out to be the loudest in the end. And remember, don't wait for somebody to lift the napkin. Be the person who acts before they do.